The chamber stretched before him like something from a dream, where crystalline walls pulsed with soft purple light, and hundreds of alien delegates filled the tiered seats that circled the central platform where he stood. Jake Murphy had been on Earth just 3 days ago fixing engines at a small repair shop in Nevada, when the ship appeared overhead and everything changed. Now he stood before the Galactic Council wearing clothes they had given him that felt too smooth against his skin, while thousands of eyes from dozens of species watched him with expressions he could not read. The princess who had brought him here stood beside him, and her name was Liara, and she was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight because her skin shimmered like moonlight on water and her eyes held colors that shifted between silver and violet. She had 4 arms, and when she moved it was like watching silk flow through air, and her voice when she spoke carried harmonics that made every word feel important. 3 weeks earlier, Liara had arrived on Earth in a small scout ship that landed behind his garage just as the sun was setting, and she had been injured with purple blood seeping from a wound in her side. Jake had pulled her from the wreckage and carried her inside and used every first aid skill he knew to stop the bleeding, even though her anatomy was all wrong and nothing made sense. For 2 days, he kept her hidden and brought her food and water and tried to communicate through gestures and broken phrases until her translator device finally synced with English. She told him she was running from an arranged marriage to a warrior prince from the Krenth Empire who wanted to unite their kingdoms through her, and she refused. Because he was cruel and cared only for power, Jake listened and nodded and brought her soup and asked no questions about politics or kingdoms, because he figured everyone deserved the right to choose their own path. When her wounds healed, she prepared to leave, and Jake helped her repair her ship working late into the nights because he was good with engines, even alien ones that ran on crystals and light on. The last night before she left, Liara had looked at him with those shifting eyes and touched his face with one of her elegant hands and said something in her language that her translator did not convert. Then she was gone, and Jake went back to fixing cars and thought that would be the end of it. But 2 weeks later, 3 massive ships appeared over Earth, and the Galactic Council made first contact with humanity, and among their delegation was Liara, dressed in royal garments that glittered like stars. The Council had come to establish diplomatic relations and assess whether humans were ready to join the greater galactic community, and Liara had requested one specific human be brought before them. Now Jake stood in this impossible chamber, while a being made of crystallized light spoke in a language that boomed through his skull, and the translator in his ear turned it into words he could understand. The council leader explained that Princess Liara of the Velian sovereignty had invoked an ancient rite called the Sanctuary Claim, which allowed any member of royal blood to claim protection over a being who had saved their life without asking for reward. By invoking this claim, Liara had bound Jake to her under galactic law, and he would be recognized as her chosen companion with all the rights and protections that came with that title. The leader said this was highly unusual because humans were not yet part of the council, and the claim created complications. A delegate who looked like a mass of tentacles with too many mouths argued that humans were too primitive and violent to be granted such status and that the claim should be voided. Another delegate with scales like brass and eyes like fire said that allowing this would set dangerous precedent, and royals would start claiming random species members to avoid their duties. Liara stepped forward and her voice rang through the chamber clear and strong. She said Jake Murphy had saved her life when he had no reason to, and had asked nothing in return, and had treated her with kindness when he could have sold her location to any number of bounty hunters who would have paid fortunes. She said he had worked beside her to repair her ship, and had never once tried to take advantage of her vulnerability. She said he represented the best of what humanity could be, and if the council wanted to judge humans, then they should judge them by beings like him. The brass-scaled delegate hissed that she was being emotional and throwing away political alliances for sentiment. Liara turned to face the delegate, fully, and her forearms spread wide in a gesture that looked like challenge. She said she would rather bind herself to an honest mechanic who knew the value of kindness than to a prince who collected conquered worlds like trophies. She said, "The Sanctuary Claim was sacred law written by the founders, and it existed precisely to protect the right to choose honor over politics. The chamber erupted in debate with delegates arguing in dozens of languages, and Jake stood there feeling very small and very lost. The council leader raised appendages for silence. He said that Liara was correct about the law and the claim was valid, but he asked Jake directly if he accepted this bond. Jake looked at Liara, who watched him with an expression he thought might be hope mixed with fear. He thought about his small garage and his quiet life and how he had never wanted anything more than to fix things and be left alone. But he also thought about how Liara had trusted him and how she had been willing to risk everything to choose her own path. He thought about how she had touched his face that last night and how something in his chest had broken when she left. So he said yes. The chamber went silent. The council leader declared the claim valid, and Jake Murphy was now bound to Princess Liara under galactic law and would be afforded all protections and responsibilities of a royal companion. The brass-scaled delegate stood and declared that the Krenth Empire would not accept this insult, and if the council honored this claim, they would consider it an act of hostility. Liara did not flinch. She said the Krenth Empire could consider it whatever they wanted, but the law was clear, and she had made her choice. The council leader looked tired in a way that transcended species. He said the claim was honored and the council would inform the Krenth Empire officially, but he warned Liara that she had made a powerful enemy. Liara bowed in what Jake recognized as acceptance. After the session ended, Liara led him through corridors that seemed to bend space until they reached a smaller chamber with windows that looked out at stars. She turned to him, and her forearms wrapped around him in an embrace that felt both alien and completely natural. She thanked him in her own language and then in English. Jake asked what happened. Now Liara explained that as her chosen companion, he would live with her and learn their ways and be protected by her family and her sovereignty. She said the Krenth would likely try to kill him to invalidate the claim, so he would need guards and training. She said his life would never be simple again. Jake laughed because nothing about any of this was simple. He asked if she had planned this from the beginning. Liara looked away and her skin shifted to deeper purple, which he was learning meant embarrassment. She admitted that when she invoked the claim, she had known it would bring him before the council, but she had not been certain he would accept. She said she had hoped because in those 2 days he had shown her what it meant to be cared for without expectation, and she had never felt that before. She said that in her world, everything was politics and alliances and duty, and he had been the first person to simply be kind. Jake reached up and touched her face the way she had touched his. He said he had no idea how to be a royal companion or how to navigate galactic politics. Liara smiled, and it was beautiful. She said she would teach him and her people would help him, and together they would figure it out. She said that choosing him had been the first real choice she had ever made, and she would not regret it. Jake looked out at the stars that stretched forever in all directions and thought about how 3 weeks ago his biggest concern had been whether he had enough coffee for the morning. Now he was bound to an alien princess and had made enemies of an empire, and was standing in a spaceship somewhere beyond Earth, looking at infinity. Should have terrified him. Instead, he felt something like peace because Liara had chosen him, not because he was powerful or important, but because he had been kind when kindness mattered. And he had chosen her not because she was a princess, but because she had been brave enough to choose her own path. In the grand scheme of the galaxy with all its politics and wars and ancient laws, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Liara took his hand in one of hers and led him toward their quarters, while stars wheeled past the windows. She told him about her home world with its crystal forests and singing rivers. She told him about her family and her duties and the training he would need. She told him about the dangers that would come and the allies they would need to find. And Jake listened and asked questions and tried to wrap his mind around this impossible new reality, but mostly he just held her hand and walked beside her, and felt grateful that when she had needed help he had been there to give it. Because sometimes the biggest choices come from the smallest kindnesses, and sometimes being human in a galaxy full of aliens means showing them what humanity can be at its best. Jake Murphy had saved a princess without knowing she was a princess, and she had claimed him before the Galactic Council, and now they would face whatever came together. It was terrifying and impossible and completely insane. But as they walked through the ship toward an unknown,